Can you, and this is where I hope it's not like one of those things for me that no matter how many times people explain it, I have to accept I'm never going to understand it. But I'm hoping that you can explain to me the thing with when you're paying for carbon emissions and how that works. And because that to me seems like something you were talking about as real attainable legislation and something we could have. And I just, you got to do it, like, dumb it down for me.
Absolutely. So, so the bottom line is we've got to level the playing field, right? Because right now, fossil fuel energy is doing this damage to the planet. And, in the marketplace, that cost isn't represented. If there isn't some sort of price on carbon, then polluters pay no penalty for dumping their pollution into our atmosphere for free, as my good friend Bill McKibben has described it. I think that's how to think of it. And so we need to make sure that stops. And, Peter, you mentioned earlier on sort of banning fracking. And, that's part there. I like to think of it in terms of two things, two independent sort of paths that we have to take at the same time. There are what we call demand side measures. We want to reduce demand for fossil fuels, and you could do that through subsidies for renewable energy. You can do that through a price on carbon. So you level the playing field so that renewable energy gets to compete fairly. Renewable energy that isn't destroying the planet gets to at least compete fairly with fossil fuel energy. So that's sort of the demand side. The supply side is important too. Banning new pipelines, banning new fossil fuel infrastructure. And it's there in particular where you've seen a lot of activism, because those sorts of, pipeline protests, and they're visible, they garner media attention. So they're important opportunities for sort of commanding the attention of the public, but they also make a difference. They reduce supply. If we stop subsidizing pipelines, if we no longer allow drilling on public lands, which Biden is going to now block, and he's going to block the Keystone XL pipeline. So Biden is doing some of the right things there. When it comes to banning fracking, for example, this is something that we talk about a lot because I'm here in Pennsylvania, which is sort of fracking central, right? It's the Marcellus Shale. There is a vigorous sort of political debate about natural gas in this state. Ultimately, where I come down is that a fossil fuel, to those who say, well, natural gas can be the bridge to a fossil fuel free future. No, it's a bridge to nowhere. The solution to a problem created by fossil fuels can't be more fossil fuels, right? I mean, it's just that simple. So how do we phase out natural gas? And what I would say is Biden does favor the sort of market mechanisms, carbon pricing, subsidies for renewables, things that make natural gas increasingly non-competitive, rather than an outright ban, which, it's you choose your weapons, and he, seeks to take a somewhat more conservative approach. But here's the example I would give. Look at what's happened to coal over the last 4 years. Coal has undergone a death spiral. Is that because of Donald Trump's war on coal? No, it's because the market is just moving in a direction where it's no longer competitive. We need to accelerate those processes, not just with coal, but with natural gas and petroleum oil. And so, we have to use every tool in the toolbox is sort of where I'm coming from.
Okay, so does that include nuclear?
What was it? Michael Shellenberger? Was that his name?
Shellenberger? Oh my God! One of my very first podcast guests came on and talked about nuclear, and some people see it as a bridge.
Mike, I believe that's his name, Michael Shellenberger. Does that ring a bell?
Unfortunately, it does.
Unfortunately,
okay, this is why we have different
all right. So we got it. All right,
right.
That's why it's all about it's a necessary conversation. Now, apparently, there's a new form of nuclear energy that is supposedly being perfected that doesn't involve.
He probably knows.
Waste.
He could probably write a dissertation on that.
Not quite, but I do know what you're talking about.
Yeah. Yes. So there is this belief that we can't actually move to a complete clean energy grid for at least who knows, 2 decades, whatever they're going to say, between solar, wind, geothermal, hydro, and biofuel. So the idea is that you got to have a bridge, and the bridge cannot be natural gas and coal. Could it be nuclear energy?
Yeah, so it's a fair question. And, the problem is these conversations are fraught because they're difficult issues to begin with, right? Just in a neutral environment, there are a lot of considerations, there are pros and cons, because obviously there's risk with nuclear energy. And so you're balancing risk. We're balancing the risk of the proliferation risks, nuclear proliferation risks, and environmental contamination risks of nuclear with the climate risk of not transitioning off fossil fuels, right? So the question then comes down to, so it's a difficult conversation in the first place. And then what makes it even more complicated is there are, actors in this space who have an agenda and are not really coming to the conversation from a place of good faith. They've got an agenda, a hidden agenda in many cases. They are, in fact, advocates, say, for some of those interests, be it fossil fuel industry or the nuclear industry. And typically, it's paired with a unjustified pessimism about our ability to scale up the obvious solutions. And let me emphasize that, I'll sort of contrast my book, The New Climate War, which just came out, which sort of where I provide a vision of the path forward, where we do scale up renewable energy and we can meet projected energy demand by scaling up existing technology. And I'll contrast that with Bill Gates' new book, where he is sort of he expresses undue pessimism about our ability to scale up renewable energy. He's even said before that we need a miracle. To solve this problem, we need a miracle. We don't need a miracle. Look up in the sky. We've got the sun, the wind at our backs, geothermal, all the things that you mentioned earlier, Peter. We have solutions, clean energy solutions that don't come with those risks. And it's simply a matter of providing the incentives so that we scale those technologies up. And too often we hear, no, there's no way, that we can do that. But hey, we could shoot particles into the stratosphere to block out some of the sunlight to try to cool the Earth back down. Or we could massively scale up new generation, new nuclear energy that doesn't even exist yet. So there is this contrast between an undue pessimism about the ready solution that we have, renewable energy, and this techno-optimism when it comes to potentially dangerous technologies that in many cases don't even exist yet. And we can't explain that sort of paired, that discrepancy between the pessimism and the optimism without understanding that in some cases there is an ideological frame that they're working out of.
And let's be clear, you don't have your agenda is just trying to do the right thing, like what that is, right? You're not promoting any specific method.
Other than the fact that I'm massively invested in carbon credits. No, I'm just kidding. These claims have been made. These claims have been made before that we climate scientists are going to get rich off of this because of all the carbon credits that that we're
talking about. Went into this is the money you were in.
Oh, no.
I could show you. I've got a whole collection of carbon credits right over here that I could. No, I mean,
bookshelf. You got a great.
Yeah.
Thanks. I'd like to think that most of us are we care about the work that we do. We got into this really for the science because we love doing science. Many of us really realized that the science that we were doing actually had some really important real world implications. And we feel some responsibility to try to inform, the world about this threat. And we recognize that there are others who are trying to contaminate our public discourse, both our atmosphere and our public discourse. And so I feel like we play an important role in pushing back against the misinformation and the disinformation.
Michael, that is a fantastic.
Thanks for watching. If you want to support our mission to transform politics into service, please like this video, subscribe, follow us on social media, and consider joining our Patreon, where you'll get early access to our interviews as well as other exclusive content. Links are in the description. Peace out.